This podcast is being brought to you by the Stockton Masters of Instructional Technology Facebook page. If you would like us to make more segments like this, please let us know. Welcome to the Meet a MAIT User podcast, where you'll find the human side to EdTech. I'm Elizabeth Rivera, and this is our first interview with our guest, Susan Allen.
Hello, everybody. This is Liz Rivera. Welcome to the very first Meet a MAIT User in a Minute podcast. Today, I have the wonderful Susan Allen. If you don't know her, you've probably seen her work on Stockton University's website because she is a photojournalist. She is amazing. She has a wide catalog of events and perspectives that she has gathered over the past few decades that she's been around working for Stockton. And today, we are going to be learning her story about how she became a MAIT graduate and also her story of how she applies instructional technology in her daily life as a photojournalist and other things that she does. How about you introduce yourself, Miss Allen? We would love to get to know about you.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to talk about the MAIT program in Stockton and share my story. So I am actually a math graduate. In 2009, I graduated with a math degree and a writing minor. And I was fortunate enough to join Stockton's staff in what was the Office of Public Relations at the time. It was a part-time position, and that eventually led to full-time. And Stockton offers an incredible education benefit where, you can go for a master's degree and there was a tuition waiver. So I, couldn't pass up that opportunity. And I chose the MAIT program because it most closely aligned with, the work that I was doing, public relations office. And basically over the past 13, in my 14th year now, my job has evolved and changed as technology changes and as social media changes.
Right.
So the MAIT program was a perfect opportunity to enhance my skills and just be ready to adapt to all those changes that I encounter every month in my job.
That's awesome. Well, that's honestly a really interesting background. Growing up in terms of your Stockton journey as Osprey from the math and writing industry sectors to PR sector to photojournalism marketing sector, because you work with the University Relations and Marketing section of Stockton, correct? Right?
Yes, I do.
Right now. So we talk about the changes in an interview in 2018 with Julia Suss. I hope I'm saying her name correctly. You mentioned that this was one of the biggest challenges of your current career. And my big question with that is, what is your advice for MAIT students as well as MAIT graduates or anybody interested in instructional technology whose jobs might have to deal with a lot of changing with trends, changing with changes of technology, changes in new educational methods that people are now trying to learn with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, I do a lot of digital engagement and visual storytelling. So the two main pieces to my job are your social media platforms and then your camera and your editing software. And honestly, the best way to keep up with the changes is to be using those tools every single day, personally and professionally. Because when you're personally invested into staying up to date, that enhances your, professional work as well. So what I kind of started was my own Instagram, What You Sees, and I'm out every single day before the sun rises. Maybe not every single day, but as many days that I can. And I'm taking pictures and I'm making content and visual stories, for my own account. And, I follow a lot of other photographers and storytellers, around the world. And a lot of art and communication and visual storytelling is building on each other's stories. And a lot of artists share, different techniques. Somebody might do something and then you realize, well, I can Stocktonize that, or, I can build on that. So there's a very big collaborative effort with social media and visual storytelling.
I find that incredibly interesting that you say that, because when I looked on your social media account, I was, first of all, wowed by the overall techniques that you use in terms of photography, in terms of just the lighting, the dynamic action, that's just fluidity that goes through your photos, and the way that people engage on there. There's a higher level of engagement that just continues to grow as your career continues. And one of my questions is, in terms of the social media career that you have, is social media is a popular form of education now, where it's just more so quick and constant. It seems that a large part of those sectors now seems to be, oh, I'm going to post something on social media that's quick, simple, something that people can read in a couple minutes. What's your advice for people trying to implement that form of learning into their social media accounts, whether it's personal marketing based or info based marketing, which is a combination of the two?
I think one of the most important pieces of advice there would be to find a theme.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's kind of South Jersey nature and wildlife. And hone in on that theme and focus on it over a long period of time. Because the more attention that you give it, the more connected to that subject you become. So It could be, if you're an art teacher, it could be, different art techniques. So focus in on a goal that you have and break that up, present that in a way that people can digest it on social media. Captions don't have to be super long. People have a very short attention span. You're scrolling on Instagram. You want
that feeling, yeah.
So you don't have a lot of time to, get somebody interested. If it's too long-winded, people are just going to pass you right by.
Yes.
So having that strong visual to make them question, oh, what is this? That's really important. And one of the best pieces of advice that I ever read was that the caption should not reiterate what we can already see in the photo. Tell us what happened that we can't see. So maybe there's a little story behind it. Maybe there's an opportunity to educate somebody. And it was actually Chris Burkhardt, who's a surf photographer. It was him who said, don't tell us what we can already see. Use that caption as an opportunity to go beyond the photo.
I actually really like that point of don't tell us what we can't actually see, because it actually reminds me of an instructional technology idea, which is cognitive load. I'm currently learning that right now in one of my classes, and it's mind-blowing. Chris is saying is 100% right, because when, for example, this can apply to not just social media, but also in my experience with PowerPoint pages, people don't like when you have just a bunch of PowerPoints where you have just straight text
and somebody reading
a bunch of words. It's just not fun. But when you have content that's maybe interactive and that they feel like they're actually doing something that's emotionally tied, like you said, something that's gripping, and when you have something that is so just impactful on the immediate moment that you see it, people are more invested in understanding what's going on and taking information in, rather than, oh my God, there's so much text, there's way too much information, way too many visuals on the screen, it's just too overwhelming for me. I feel like you might use cognitive load a lot, but I'm wondering, what other instructional ideas did you take away from MAIT that you continue to use in your daily job?
The visual design and communications class really gave me some great ways to organize and present content in a way that people can take it in easily. Bulleting things. If you just have a massive paragraph with, people see that and they're like, no. So definitely different design techniques.
Yes.
And repetition, contrast. There were different principles that we went over to help us to present that content in the best possible way.
And I agree. What's funny is that I'm actually in that class right now as we speak, as of this interview, with Dr. Jun Lee. She's amazing. And I heard, at least from what you told me, that you also taught this course at one point. So I want to ask you, one, what are your favorite principles that you believe are must uses? If there's like 1 to 3 that you believe are must uses for any instructional tech designer. So the other question is, what was the process like to become an adjunct? What do you believe were the biggest challenges of being an adjunct? Because I do know that it's common for quite a few MAIT graduates to transition into teaching, whether it's on the corporate level or often on the college level as adjunct professors.
Great question. So I think one of the greatest outcomes of my MAIT degree was that I had the opportunity to then teach at Stockton. And it was the visual design and communications class that I taught. And because I have a lot of photography in my background, I was able to incorporate that into the course
Yes.
with a long-term photo storytelling project. And let me just pick three. I mean, there's so many more, but be aware of your background. You might get kind of locked into your subject. Say I'm taking a picture of a person. You're looking at the person and paying super attention to them. And you're not really looking at what's going on in the background. Is something coming out of the back of their head? Are there distracting elements? Really paying attention to what's going on in the entire scene. And when you're looking through a little viewfinder of the camera, that is a challenge. So, it's training yourself to do that. Two, would be lighting. Lighting is everything in photography.
Really? Okay. That makes sense.
Sunrise and sunset are the best times to shoot. But you can't
golden hour, right?
Yeah, exactly. But you can't always have what you need. Maybe the person's only available at noon or 1 o'clock, and you have these harsh shadows from the sunlight. Quick tip, you can always find a shady spot, and then that way they won't have those shadows from the sun. They'll be in an evenly lit environment because you pulled them into the shade.
That's something that I've always struggled with my photos. I'm gonna write this stuff down when I'm done with this interview. This is great stuff, and I honestly I agree with you. I've had trouble with that with my own photos, even with graduation, just like the sun just hits the face.
If you want to get detail in someone's face and not a silhouette, don't shoot towards the window. Turn around and use that window light as like a great lighting source, and then make sure the window's to your back. Pay attention to light and find that quality light. And sometimes you can find cool shadows if you're in a harsh lighting situation, or really long shadows at sunrise and sunset. But just always pay attention to the light. And then the third part is there is an opportunity with every photo to kind of elaborate on it in the caption. And sometimes I like to focus on the different senses, like what were the elements that people didn't experience. So like the temperature, what it felt like outside, the smells, the sounds, things that, don't necessarily translate in an image. Capitalize on those opportunities in your caption.
Because then it like sparks the imagination of the person.
Yeah.
Gets them more engaged with the visual and the meaning behind it, right? Contextualize it.
Try to bring your viewer into that scene, really document what it was like so that they can feel like they were there too.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think that's especially important in today's age where everyone can take the same bajillion food photos on Instagram, but when you get into how these content creators make it much easier for them to become successful in their work, no matter what side it was, I often find that, like you said, the sensory context of the situation often just causes the photo to pop off the page, or causes maybe what might be, in my experience, a photo that might be not 100% the most aligned with the principles of visual design, but story-wise have a lot of context that make it super important and make it super relatable to the person that's reading.
And relatable is such a key point here. You want them to connect with the content and, recognize something, or it'll just, if they can relate to it, they'll remember it more.
I 100% agree with you. That is great insight. One of my questions that I also have for you is in terms of something relatable, something that it can connect with. As you mentioned previously in this interview, you do have a very strong connection with wildlife. And I know that even started when you were in MAIT. You mentioned that you have a capstone project where you focused on wildlife. My question is, why did you choose Lake Fred's biodiversity specifically as your topic? And for MAIT students, as well as any student struggling with a capstone project out there, what is your piece of advice for those struggling to get the topic or struggling to develop it into something that can turn into an actual project?
You want to pick something that you're passionate about and that you are going to want to focus on for that entire semester or year. Um,
Mhm.
and ask yourself, what could you see yourself focusing on for that long? Something that you truly are committed and dedicated to. For me, with the MAIT program, you have to identify a problem and then develop a solution using technology.
Right.
I love the campus biodiversity, and we have Lake Fred, but there wasn't really a resource for people who weren't in a science class where they could learn about the different wildlife. So I wanted to create something that visitors, anyone, new students, people who weren't in a science class could gain a broader understanding of how important Stockton's campus is and the Pine Barrens and our ecosystem. So that's when I created field guides with QR codes, and the QR codes kind of gave you, an added bonus content that was video and audio so that you could hear what does a spring peeper sound like, or different bird calls. You can only see and read so much, but hearing it kind of helped enhance that. So I picked something that was very close to my heart, and it made the experience that much more enjoyable.
That's awesome. And I agree with you, because time and time again, when I talk with people who have created their capstones, they've told me, well, this was a problem that was really bothering me in my workplace, or a problem that was related to something I was noticing just even when I was working with other colleagues or college students, that I wanted to adapt into something that people could use after I'm gone. My question is like, it's not restrictive, right? I've seen cookbooks be done with a capstone. I've seen, well, you have projects like yours, which are entire blogs written for a capstone. I've seen all sorts of things. So have you seen any other capstones as a photojournalist that really caught your attention, that could show the variety of topics or methods to a capstone?
Trying to think. I'm not as familiar with what the recent projects were.
I do know that there's some ways that if you're lucky, you can access some of them online. Like I remember that one of the previous capstones for MAIT were all put into a online storybook software, so you can read over previous projects. However, I do know that for this year's capstones, there's going to be an expo, which includes MAIT students. It'll be a MAIT expo on April 25th. It will be then, it's currently in the works right now, so I guess we'll be both looking at the capstones then when we have the time, exciting. Which is very exciting.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have an answer for that one.
No need to apologize. Sometimes the answers to questions are, I don't know. And sometimes that I don't know may lead you on a journey to somewhere else. I mean, isn't that a whole big thing of journalism? If I'm correct, it's like sometimes you say, I don't know. And then it goes into a story of, well, why is this happening? And blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Another question I have relates to what you did after you graduated and you completed your capstone. Amazing capstone, by the way. I took a look at it. It's so much interesting information. One of my questions has to be, what happened with the window project, where basically if anybody visits Stockton's campus right now, there's this whole area of the academic building where there's this beautiful mural of bird silhouettes and text that says about basically birds shouldn't be hitting the windows. I heard that you were a major proponent of this project, but it was also a really huge effort between all sorts of science majors and professors who taught those majors, as well as majors related in spreading the word about it. So is it possible for you to talk about this process of how this project became so big, and your advice for if you're graduating and you want to make a change with Stockton, what methods or principles from instructional technology you could use to apply elements of your degree into awareness campaigns like this or projects like this?
Sure. Part of my capstone project was applying for a 2020 grant to get the funding to print field guides. So the MAIT program introduced me to that 2020 funding process, which has now, it's called the Compass Fund. So same concept, there are funds available for projects that meet certain goals at the university, such as sustainability. Um,
Yes.
so I was familiar with that from the capstone. And then, you know, I work very close to the K-Wing breezeway, which is glass, lots of reflections. And during spring and fall migration, the birds would fly right into the windows and drop to the ground. Some would be stunned, some
Really?
would die.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry to
over the
hear that.
years, Stockton School of Natural Sciences, John Rakita and Lester Block would
Mhm.
either, rehabilitate these birds to help release them. And if they didn't make it, they made their way into our taxidermy collection to become study skins for NAM students to look at.
Mhm.
But they also kept a log. Where are these window strikes happening? When? What species? So we had all of this data. And our institutional research office, Alice Sakura, she was able to analyze that data, put it into, a more visual presentation with different charts and graphs.
Right.
Um, so we thought, what are different solutions to this problem? And, other places around the world were using artwork, and we have a graphic design department at Stockton. And so we kind of had this arts, sciences, graphic design, university relations and marketing team all kind of come together
Wow.
to
Amazing.
design this mural that's actually it's printed on perforated film, so you can see the mural when you're outside and the birds, so that it blocks the reflections. But
Right.
when you're inside, you don't see the mural, you can see a perfect view to the outside, so it's not obstructing the view. So it was really the MAIT program that prepared me to write that second 2020 grant to secure the funding for that project.
Oh, I
And
gotta say that's incredible. That's
thank you.
incredible. The great job on the project, everyone involved. It's a beautiful mural and a beautiful message behind it. So thank you for saving the birds. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and it's got an educational component. People might not be familiar with that kind of a conservation issue, and it kind of has messaging right on the outside, so people can just learn something as they're walking by.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly, which is just makes it all the more powerful because now everybody sees it, and then it gets people talking. And you know as much as I do that word of mouth is the best way of advertising a point of view. So I think it's great. So congratulations on the success of your project and success of the grant.
Thank you.
On that note, I would also like to congratulate you on another big milestone that happened recently. Well, two big milestones. Recently, I heard that you got runner up in not one but two photo competitions. Can we talk about that?
Sure. So the National Wildlife Federation has a magazine, and they
Mm-hmm.
have a photo contest, and I submitted a portfolio on horseshoe crabs and red knots on the Delaware Bay
Mm-hmm.
and their connections to our region.
Mm-hmm.
And it got selected as honorable mention. So it was the series of images was published on their website, which is very exciting because I'm a huge fan of the magazine and their Instagram account.
That's
And
amazing. Congratulations. That's
thank you.
awesome.
I appreciate it. And the other one was New Jersey Monthly Magazine,
Mm-hmm.
which is, one of our local pieces that highlights, our region. I had submitted a macro image of horseshoe crab eggs. So you could actually see these little tiny horseshoe crabs developing inside their eggs, which are translucent when they get, to be a certain age right before they hatch.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a close-up view of that. And basically, if you're walking by on the sand, you wouldn't even notice these little developing horseshoe crab eggs. They're that tiny.
Mm-hmm.
But
Wow.
using the macro lens, I was able to really zoom in on that. And
Mm-hmm.
that got runner-up too in the New Jersey Monthly
Ooh,
contest.
that's awesome. Congratulations, Susan. That is amazing. I have to say that that's just incredible. I mean, talk about education and getting wildlife education specifically on a larger scale, getting people to see the environment in a different way. I think that's just incredible. So congratulations. I have to say, in terms of all of your adventures, you've been on a lot in terms of wildlife photography, haven't you? I looked through your website and Instagram. You've been all over. You've been to the Grand Canyon. You've been on mountains. You've been on all sorts of beaches everywhere. So my question with that is this: what do you think was the hardest photo to take in terms of the preparation, getting there, or just the amount of time to take a photo? And my other question is, what is your favorite animal or plant or just any form of wildlife to take a photo of?
I like this question. So probably the one that took the most preparation and was the hardest to get were portraits of the endangered humpback chub, which is a fish that's actually in the minnow family, but they're much larger than minnows.
Mm-hmm.
They live in the Colorado River Basin. They're in the Colorado River.
Uh-huh.
And I had volunteered for the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, to do
Wow.
a fish monitoring survey
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
on, it was actually juvenile humpback chubs. And we were dropped off in a helicopter on the LCR, which is the Little Colorado River, a tributary off the main Colorado.
Okay.
And for 2 weeks, we stayed there. And I had handmade a little tank. And I couldn't use glass because how am I going to keep that from breaking, in those conditions and being dropped off in a helicopter? Like that wasn't an option. So
Mm-hmm.
I used plexiglass and,
Okay.
had this little tank and I filled it up with, the river water and put the fish in. I had 2 flashes and
Mm-hmm.
basically wanted these portraits of the fish on a white background.
Oh, wow. That
So
sounds complicated.
it is. And, you're kind of in this kind of dirt, not dirty, but there's lots of silt and sand, and that would, show up in these macro photos. So,
Mm.
that was a challenge, but I set up a little table, had the flashes and everything. And whenever we'd catch, a perfect little humpback chub, I'd put it in the tank and take those pictures. So it's probably my favorite fish species and the photo that took the most time to create,
Mm.
building that custom tank.
That's an awesome story. Humpback chub honestly does sound pretty cute. It sounds like a pretty cute animal. When I think of humpback chub, I'm pretty shocked that it's part of the minnow family because usually when we think of humpbacks, we usually think of the gigantic humpback whale, a little
Yeah.
itty bitty fish that's also called a humpback. That must create some confusion. But that's incredible fish species. It seems to me based on your page, you're more interested in on that side of it too, right? You cover all sorts of birds, fish, plants. Sometimes I've seen you cover some insects. So do
Mhm.
you like to do the more under the surface sort of animals that don't get as much recognition, or do you like to do a mix of both?
I do, I think I kind of focus on what's here at home and like backyard. So
Mm-hmm.
birds, anybody can go out in their backyard and enjoy birds, whether you're in the city, the suburbs, or the country.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Birds and bugs are everywhere.
Right.
So that's something special, and an opportunity that anybody can take advantage of. And then the horseshoe crabs and red knots. Basically, these horseshoe crabs spawn on the beaches in the spring. These long
Mm-hmm.
distance migrating birds come to the beach right at the time they're laying their eggs, eat as many eggs as possible to like boost their weight so they have enough energy to complete their journey to breed in the Arctic.
Right.
And of the entire world, the Delaware Bay right here is where all of that action takes place during the spring. So that's like a phenomenon that is unique to our area. So that's kind of why, I focus on that because it's something that happens really nowhere else to the same extent.
I did not know that there's this whole massive process going on right here in the Delaware Bay. I think that should be talked about, so I'm glad you are focusing on that. But I have a question for those who don't know what red knots are. What are red knots? Because when I think of knots, I think of like a rope knot
Yeah.
or maybe a knot in a piece of wood, but I don't think of an animal or creature or plant. What's a red knot?
It's actually a shorebird. So you know you see the little sanderlings in Dunlin that run up and down as the waves are coming in and out, and they're feeding in the sand. So they're a shorebird like that,
Mm-hmm.
but they're called a red knot because they have a red chest,
Mm.
and they land on our beaches, and you'll see them, pecking in the sand, and they're actually digging out those little horseshoe crab eggs.
Mm-hmm.
And they're only here, it's like a 2-week window,
Mm-hmm.
and they're basically just feasting
Mm.
on that free buffet so that they can make their rest of their journey.
Ah, okay. I mean, honestly, it's a really interesting name for a bird, but at least now we know because it seems to be the horseshoe crabs. At least from what I've seen from photos, you love doing horseshoe crabs and all sorts of sea creatures like sharks. I know you've done a whole thing on sharks
Yeah,
with a whole group, which that's really interesting. If you want to talk about that, please feel free.
sure. I think everybody's probably heard of Mary Lee, the great white shark,
Mm-hmm.
Osearch, the group that tagged her. A couple summers ago, Osearch was right off of Wildwood in New Jersey doing a shark tagging expedition. And I reached out to them and introduced myself, and I wanted to know if they'd allow me to do a story. And they said, sure, you can join us for the day. We'll go offshore. It ended up being a really rough day, so they couldn't actually deploy it's a platform that lowers into the water. So if they
Mm-hmm.
did catch a shark, it would come onto this platform, but it was too rough for that. So
Mm-hmm.
there weren't any sharks caught, but it was still an incredible day on the water. And, different researchers were there, and we had the opportunity to learn about what they were studying, see all of the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, and I did a story on that for my personal blog.
I think that's very cool that you got to do that.
It
And
was, it was
it,
amazing.
it sounds really fun. And then you also got to do a lot of interesting events as well related to other forms of science, not just environmental science, but also the more technical sciences. So you've been covering quite a few topics on technical sciences here at home, here at Stockton, as well as if I recall correctly, you also had a project with NASA in 2015. You got sent with like 40 other journalists to the middle of Mississippi, where surprisingly they were doing some cool work there, right? I don't know if I hear that correctly.
Yeah, that all started on Twitter. One of our physics professors sent me a tweet and said, "You should do this." And NASA, the Stennis Space Center in Mississippi, was looking for social media content creators to
Mm-hmm.
document the RS-25 rocket engine test.
Mm-hmm.
And I applied and I was accepted. So I got to go down there representing Stockton to document this rocket engine test. So I, did video, blogging, social media
Mm-hmm.
as it was happening live to kind of showcase a piece of NASA history with our own, local community. And from NASA's perspective, they wanted their news to reach people that it might not necessarily reach traditionally with traditional media. So that was really exciting.
Exciting too. I think that's great. And in terms of experiences of just covering events in general, especially at Stockton, what are your favorite events you like to cover on home ground? What type of photos and stories do you like to pick out? How do you like to source stories that will be your next selection of photos?
I like this question too. Probably event wise, you can't top commencement. Everybody is so happy that day, wants to have their picture taken.
Mm-hmm.
That'll always be, the ultimate photo event.
Mm-hmm.
But also university weekend is really great because parents are back on campus and there's so many fun activities for students.
Right.
And welcome week because, everybody's really excited to start, their next 4 or 5 years, their Stockton journey. So that's exciting too.
Mm-hmm.
And move in day because parents, are saying goodbye to their kids, friends, or, just being made. So it's like a bittersweet but exciting time. But probably my absolute favorite is just, my camera is always with me. It's right here next to me. But just taking the camera out for a 15-minute walk and just looking around. There's always students who are studying in a cool little corner of campus or doing a research project or painting Lake Fred. It's the everyday photo ops and just kind of going up to students and introducing myself and just asking them if they mind if I, spend a couple minutes taking some pictures. I think those are my favorite.
I honestly love that too. That's what I really enjoyed about going to Stockton was always the little moments that you catch on the corner of your eye. Like you said, people painting or people fishing in Lake Fred, or maybe a class is outside and they're teaching something, you can overhear what some of the stuff they're saying, or maybe you just catch an event or a club happening as a club's tabling. It's really incredible, those little moments, and I think that's what really made going to Stockton so special for me. In terms of finding things in the moment, teachable things in the moment, story things in the moment, I must ask, because you said always changing, always do things every day, but how do you just in all of the in all of the hubbub that's happening, how do you have what do you like to do in your moments of when you're stuck on inspiration or you need a mental break? Who are like your idols that you look at for journalism or for photography that you look at and you say, okay, maybe I'll try to do something on angle based on this, or maybe I'll try to write a story that's kind of based on that similar concept.
Oh, it's a good one. So Amy Vitale is a National Geographic photographer, and she's covered a broad range of topics, wildlife, communities, and her work is very inspiring to me, as well as Corey Arnold. He did a series on the national parks when they were celebrating 100 years of the national parks. And he did portraits of just millennials and how they enjoy the park. So it could be people cliff jumping, bike riding, hiking, skiing. That project I really connected with, and that was really inspiring. I have a lot of really awesome friends and local photographers who, shooting with them is incredible. And really just being outside is full of inspiration. You get lots of inspiration from just being outdoors.
That's awesome. And I like they have a whole mix of inspirations in that you look outward and inward for inspiration. I think that's something that people in structural technology should definitely do too, or any industry should try to do if they're stuck, because I find that people get so stuck in mentally in that one, like I have to do this, I have to fill in this box, I have to check this. And it's only when, like you said, you look outside to sources like that people know what they're doing and have a different path that they can go on.
Yeah. Something that I found that's a challenge is, say you're going to the same beach every morning, or, I've worked on the same campus for 14 years. I've photographed every spot on this campus. How do you make it look different year after year?
Right.
And something that helps me is, challenge yourself to shoot something with a different lens that you wouldn't normally use. So like go telephoto or go super wide when you wouldn't normally use that lens. So changing up your lens choice and forcing yourself to make that work, that helps to boost some creativity. And also shutter speed. Trying like slowing your shutter speed and doing motion blurs. Just doing things out of the ordinary can help spark creativity.
I like that. Get creative, get outside the box. And so that way the mundane becomes something special, which I can definitely see in other majors too, even with anthropology, sociology. The whole theme is we look at the mundane and try to get inspiration within it. We try to look at things that seem normal to the naked eye and try to learn more about the story behind it, or try to figure out meaning from behind it. So I love that point that you just made. I really agree with that. Thank you. So one question I have, these are just fun questions now. We're at the story part. These are fun questions now. One question is, which film character or TV character or book character do you believe best fits your learning style? I'm curious to see what you would pick as what you believe your style is.
That's a good one. Probably Anne in Anne of Green Gables.
Why do you say Anne of Green Gables? That's an interesting choice.
She was always outside, and very hands-on learner. And I watched that show on repeat as a kid.
Have you seen a new version with on Netflix? I think there's a new version on Netflix.
I did watch that.
It's a really good version, honestly, of Anne of Green Gables. I loved reading that book growing up too. So I related to the hands-on learning. I'm very much a hands-on learner. So I think that's a great choice of character. And then what about how you work? Would the character still be Anne of Green Gables? Do you work the same way, or do you find that your character personality shifts?
Oh, that's a good one. Trying to think. Maybe Little Women. Jo, who wants to be a writer and is working on a book. She spends a lot of time just, she's self-directed. She knows what she wants to do, and she's, working on that writing. I think that one would best describe.
I think those are both fantastic choices, and considering what I learned about you today, makes a lot of sense, in my opinion. Like, just from the outside looking in, I think those are fantastic choices and really fit your style. So those are great. The last question I have is, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years with your career? Like, how do you want to continue utilizing what you learned from MAIT in your career, in your current trajectory? Where you hope to be?
Definitely still taking pictures and still telling stories. Obviously, I think maybe the way in which we present them and the platforms, that will definitely be changing. And, I don't even necessarily know what it will look like, but probably more video. And just, the same skills are going to be needed, but it'll just be presented in different ways as, TikTok evolves, and Instagram Reels are focusing more on video, and not necessarily long form video, but like short, getting the point across quick, making information stand out. So definitely just keeping up with the trend.
I honestly feel like that's where a lot of the content's going to, with YouTube Shorts, TikTok, and other such microlearning platforms becoming more and more prominent in education and learning and just media creation in general. I think that is definitely where things may go. And now I guess we're almost done with the interview. All I have to ask is, do you have anything that you want to say, anything you want to say on this platform that you want our lovely listeners to follow?
Definitely follow Stockton University on Instagram and TikTok. And if you go to the Stockton homepage, you can connect with Stockton's main social media platforms right in the footer of our homepage. But I guess my main message is, if you're on the fence about, starting a graduate program, or even specifically the MAIT program, but really any program in general, if you're on the fence, go for it, because, investing in your education is investing in yourself and in your future. And you can really do something to help make a difference, especially with, your capstone project.
What a great takeaway, Susan. That is our interview with Susan Allen. This is Elizabeth Rivera ending the Meet a MAIT user segment, and we're signing off.
Here's the thank you section for this segment. Firstly, I would like to thank Dr. Ackman and the Graduate Studies Department for giving me the opportunity to work as a graduate assistant for the MAIT Facebook page, as well as giving me the idea to create the segment in the first place. Without them, this segment wouldn't be possible. Additionally, I would like to thank Susan Allen for coming on this segment and telling her amazing story. Finally, I would like to thank you, the wonderful listeners who took the time out of your day to listen to our podcast. Like I said in the intro segment, if you have any thoughts about today's segment, please let us know on the Facebook page. I'm Elizabeth Rivera, and I hope you have a great morning, afternoon, and night.